next week on Survivor.
At this point in the game, each team is down to 3 players. Except for you, Team Burrito. You're up to 17.
Oh, Dios mío!
Make that 18.
Hey, it's my great-grandson!
Our next challenge is for reward. To win, you're gonna have to swim 200 yards out into the ocean.
Come on, man. That's like the 8th swimming challenge, dog. When we gonna have a basketball challenge?
Yeah, or a soccer challenge.
We want ping pong challenge.
It's a swim challenge. Team White Bread, you can use your canoe.
What?
First team back with the flag wins. Want to know what you're playing for? Bucket of fried chicken.
I got it. Here it is. Let's go. Give me the chicken.
The debate over the Washington Redskins name has moved from criticism to ridicule. The irreverent Comedy Central program South Park poked fun at the NFL team's loss of its federal trademark protection in a commercial that ran during yesterday's game between Washington and Philadelphia.
In the name of decency, I am asking that you please stop using the name Washington Redskins to refer to your company.
Stop? But why?
You have no right to use our name to get attention.
The trademark got pulled, so I'm totally free to use the name, actually.
Look, don't you see that when you call your organization the Washington Redskins, it's offensive to us?
How is it offensive?
It's derogatory, Mr. Cartman. Makes it feel like a joke.
From now on, I too will be abstinent. I'll be as untouched as the turn signal in an Asian woman's car.
How much signal I need to cut across 8 lanes? None? I turn now. Good luck, everybody else!
Sir, my message is simple. Jews, homosexuals, Mexicans, Arabs, and all kinds of different types stink, and I hate them.
People, please welcome Mr. Liu Kim and Mr. Junichi Takayama.
Shake that.
你好嘛 South Park Elementary! Konnichiwa! How are y'all feeling? Hey, Mr. Takayama, did you know that China and Japan are actually different countries? Oh, really? Hey, that's right. If you look at map, you can see. This whole thing is China, and Japan is this little bitty country over here. And that's why the Japanese always try to take over China.
Hey, shut up with the noise!
Hey, shut up with the shut up!
You shut up with the shut up!
Shut up your face! Now am I a dog? I want to shut up!
Why you know I shut up?
I make you shut up! You shut up!
Hey, I poke out of my head!
Okay, read the 3rd row down, please.
Hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, oh, hey!
Rented that movie, Pride recently. Have you guys seen that movie? Anybody see that? It's about the first all-black swim team and the difficulties they had to go through being the first all-black swim team. Let me ask you a question. How many of those white people are evil movies are they gonna make? It's like, it's all the way down to swimming. You know? I'm starting to run out of white guilt, you know? No, it's like those movies. They started off unbelievable. Started off with Roots, right? White guilt was at an all-time high. I could barely even watch it. I'm like, dude, I got it. My ancestors are evil, okay? Please turn the channel, dude. Please turn the channel. They're still hitting them. Turn the channel. This is gonna be on all week? Jesus Christ, turn the channel. Then in the 80s, there was like a football movie. Then like Cuba Gooding wanted to be like a scuba diver. Remember that? And now, it's all the way down to swimming. And I gotta admit, I don't think I give a It's a recreational activity. Plus, I've been in pools. There's been black people in the pool, you know. I never saw any white guy, like, trying to, like, prevent people from getting into the pool. It's like, they just, like, making this up. I'm not being a dick here either, okay? Just to clarify, you know, I just want anybody coming up to me after the show, like, you know, I was thinking it, and then you said it, and then... I'm not saying that I don't think black people should be allowed to put on some Speedos and go for a dip. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these movies, like, the characters aren't even believable. Like, they always have to have, like, the over-the-top, uninhibited white racist character, you know? You know that guy? He's a guy, like, he's supposed to represent all the white evil, you know? He's like the dude they always have, like, screaming during the movie trailer. They'd be like, they were the first all-black swim team. Get out of the pool! He's got, like, a big vein in his forehead. He's just screaming, not even looking around, you know? Dude, it's ridiculous. Real racism is quiet. It's subtle. People look around first, make sure they make sure the coast is clear. There's disclaimers, like, dude, you know I'm not racist, but these insert group name followed by up conversation, right? That's how it goes down.
A lot of people don't like my comedy. A lot of white people don't like my comedy. A lot of white people say this to me. Hey, Amir. Hey. You get on stage, you make your jokes about white people. You say white people this, white people that. What if I did something like that, huh? What if I got on stage and I said, yeah, black people are like this, Muslims are like that. You'd probably call me a racist, wouldn't you? And I say, yeah, I would. Yeah, you should never do that. That's bad for your health. They're like, well, you do that, Amir. You do that. You get on stage, you make your jokes about white people. Don't you think that's a kind of racism? Don't you think that's dun 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 reverse racism? I said, no, I don't think that's reverse racism. Not because I think reverse racism doesn't exist, right? If you ask some black and brown people, they'll tell you flat out, there is no such thing as reverse racism. I don't agree with that. I think there is such a thing as reverse racism, and I could be a reverse racist if I wanted to. All I would need would be a time machine, right? And what I'd do is I'd get in my time machine, I'd go back in time to before Europe colonized the world, right? And I'd convince the leaders of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Central and South America to invade and colonize Europe, right? Just occupy them, steal their land and resources, set up some kind of, like, I don't know, trans-Asian slave trade where we exported white people to work on giant rice plantations in China. Just ruin Europe over the course of a couple of centuries so all their descendants would want to migrate out and live in the places where black and brown people come from. But of course, in that time, I'd make sure I set up systems that privilege black and brown people at every conceivable social, political, and economic opportunity. The white people would never have any hope of real self-determination. Just every couple of decades, make up some fake war as an excuse to go and bomb them back to the Stone Age and say it's for their own good because their culture's inferior, and then, just for kicks, subject white people to colored people's standards of beauty, so they end up hating the color of their own skin, eyes, and hair. If, after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of that, I got on stage at a comedy show and said, hey, what's the deal with white people? Why can't they dance? That would be reverse racism.
Marvin, thank you. You've been great. Good night.
Soul Man. He didn't give up. He got down.
There's enough C-list star power here that someone should have known better. Perennial 80s fave C. Thomas Howell is a pampered rich boy who's got to pay his way through Harvard Law.
Well, I realize my father makes a lot of money, but you see, he's not giving me any.
But honors for suckers, so he takes pills that make his skin darker so he'll qualify for a black-only scholarship.
These are the 80s, man. It's the Cosby decade. America loves black people.
Yep, in 1986, Hollywood, and the audiences who made this a box office success, thought blackface was okay.
my heroin and my hypodermic needle. Give me some more watermelon while you're at it.
Yes, dear.
White fat slut. Once again, I must protest!
The 60s were a simpler time. Manhattan was cleaner, fashion was crisper, and there were no Asian actors in Hollywood. Apparently. Well, how else do you explain this inexcusable case of yellowface? That's Mickey Rooney under the false teeth, squinty eyes, and outrageous Japanese accent, playing Holly Golightly's landlord.
I am definitely this time going to call in the police!
Come to think of it, even with an Asian actor, this would be an offensive part of an otherwise classic film.
Well, that's more better.
Well, it's one of our boys.
The sun shines bright in my old Kentucky home.
What makes the red man red?
When did he first say ugh?
Why did he ask you how?
Let's go back a million years to the very first Indian prince. He'd kiss a maid and start to blush, and we've all been blushing since.
Say, mama.
Who's there?
I'm the full of brush man. I'm working my way through college.
Thank you.
Now I got
Okay, big boy. Hey, you be my man Friday. Savvy? You Friday, me Mickey.
Savvy, you Friday, me Mickey.
No, you Friday, me Mickey.
Also, a big ton of gasoline and many firecrackers. So, I lose my face.
What's all the rookin'? Come on, step aside, brother. What's cooking around here? What's the good news? What's frying, boy? Just look down here, brother.
And prepare yourself for a shot.
We work all day, we work all night, we never learn to read or write. We're happy-hearted roustabouts. When other folks have gone to bed, we stay until we're almost dead. We're happy-hearted roustabouts. Don't complain when we get our pay, and when we do, we throw our pay away. When we get our pay, we blow our money all away.
Also, oh, I beg my pardon. I bow my stomach at you, very reverent. That's all right. Happy cherry blossoms to you, please. My boy,
and they were still hammering nails. Construction was still going on. Slaves that worked there were well fed and had decent lodgings provided by the government, which stopped hiring slave labor in 1802. However, the feds did not forbid subcontractors from using slave labor.
You had a ship full of African men, women, and children who were at the mercy of the captain and all the sailors on that crew. And those men could have sex with anybody they wanted to. The women, the children, and the men.
You had to see 3 months tied down with these white men. There ain't no women there for the most part. When they start bringing women, they weren't even bringing women. They were bringing girls between the ages of 6 and 15 and raping them all. But they also were raping the men. Same things are happening on the plantation to demasculinize the black man.
Control the slave population is to rape a father in front of his sons,
or to take the biggest, baddest black man on the plantation and do something horrible to him, to completely humiliate and emasculate him so that people won't respect him anymore. And that still happens to this day.
In the Caribbean, they had seasoning plantations, which were plantations used to break the slaves. And one plantation, or one place that had a lot of seasoning plantations, was Jamaica. And people have to wonder, what were they doing on these seasoning plantations that was worse than what was happening on the regular plantations? Well, one thing that they were doing on these plantations, especially in Jamaica, they were doing a process called buck breaking, where the white supremacist slave owner or the white supremacist overseer would literally rape black men in front of the whole black population in order to break his spirit, in order to break him down as a man, in order to show dominance against him, in order to show the rest of the black population that this is not your leader. I just made your leader submit to me sexually. And this happened a lot in Jamaica. This is why homosexuality is so looked down upon in Jamaican culture today.
And it was a way primarily of cutting down those who would rebel. In other words, it was a matter of power and control and domination. And they would call it buck busting, but it was really butt busting.
Slavery continued until 1865 for about 2 generations, right? So how do you reconcile that? You can no longer bring in Africans, but you still have the business of slavery. So they still needed Africans to do the work down south, especially after the cotton gin was invented. So you had the creation of breeding farms. 2 of the largest slave breeding farms in the United States were on the eastern shore of Maryland and right outside of Richmond, Virginia. They literally bred black people like cattle. They would have a strong black man have sex with a healthy black woman. That woman could be his mother, his sister, his aunt, his cousin. It didn't matter, because the end product was produce a child that I can sell, bodies that I can sell and ship down to Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. It was a business.
We had breeding farms in the United States that would put one person from one plantation against another. We even had a system where if you were a breeder, male on one plantation, a female on another plantation, or even on the same plantation, even if you were mother and son, they would mate you. And so I tell a lot of my patients and a lot of my friends, you got to stop using the MF word, because that was a description of what actually happened when the paper bag would go over the head to put one breeder against another when they were related.
Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging.
Collecting little pencils like this. I've seen alligators on jars. I've seen alligator ashtrays, and I've seen them depicted with kids in it. And I was wondering why the children would be there. As a matter of fact, this particular pencil sharpener, this is a pencil sharpener or a pencil holder with a black head of a baby sitting out of its mouth. I didn't pay any attention. I have been collecting for quite a few years, and I have the posters and things like that about different things. And then one day I was down in Florida. I'd gone down with my wife, and I took a trip for myself off to the Wild Blue Yonder, going out to hunt artifacts. And in my quest to hunt artifacts, I came upon a pawn shop in Sanford, Florida. In the pawn shop was a gentleman who owned it. They went and got him and told him I was there, and I wanted to buy some of the shackles he had hanging around the walls. I asked him, could I buy them? He said no. He didn't want to sell anything. He just wanted me to see it. Then we began to talk. And I asked him, I said, look, please let me buy something. I got to take something from here. He says, no. He says, I don't want to sell anything. He said, but I'm going to the back and I'll sit down. Meanwhile, he came out and came back out and he began to talk to me. He said, you know, he said, you probably don't know this. He said, but years ago, he said, my grandfather, before he died, told me of the things they would do. He said he would go down. He said his grandfather said they would go down and they would take babies with them. I said, what do you mean babies? He says, well, let me tell you. He said the slaves who had babies, they would steal the babies during the course of the day, sometimes when the mothers weren't washing. I said, what do you mean babies? I said, you mean babies like 5 or 6 years old? He says, no. These babies, some would be infants, some would be a year old. He said some would be toddlers. He said they would grab these children and take them down to the swamp and leave them in pens like little chicken coops. They would go down there at night, take these babies and tie them up because they hunted the big bull alligators. These big bull alligators were not raised on farms. They were in the wild. These alligators would weigh 600, 700, 800 pounds. Those are the ones they wanted. They would skin them, make the wallets, get the meat, do different things with them. He said, but what they were doing was tie them up, put a rope around their neck and around their torso, around here, and tie it tight. He said, I said, well, what would the babies be doing? He said, well, my grandfather said they'd be screaming. He said, what would you do? He said, just let them scream. He said, what they would do, it would help them to chum the water. He said, when they would throw the babies in tied to this rope, he said, in a matter of minutes, he said, the alligators were on them. He said the alligators would clamp his jaws on that child. As a matter of fact, once he clamped on him, he was really swallowed. You couldn't see anything but the rope. And we would pull the alligator in and tie his nose and hit him in the head with an axe, a pickaxe. He said we would then drag him to the shore. We'd drag him to the shore and leave him lay, and we would do it again, maybe 2 or 3 times a night. I said, so what do you mean? He said, well, yeah, they were taking these babies and killing them for alligator bait. I said, so all these things I've been collecting, are really, really something that I can really talk about and say they're of a truth by what you say? He said, I'm telling you, he said, nobody wants to talk about it. He said, I'm only telling you because you're here. I may never hear from you again. He said, but these things actually depict the acts that they did to slave babies back in the Bayou country and down the south. They did this. They hunted alligators with these babies. That's why they call it alligator bait.
I stand before you today to offer an apology to former students of Indian residential schools.
When most Canadians think of Canada's darkest moments, they will often think residential schools. It began in 1876 when Canada opened its first of these schools. Put in place by the British Canadian government, they were an attempt at turning Native American children into clean, English-speaking British Canadian citizens. This was done in many cases by forcefully taking these young children away from their parents and placing them into schools where any and all Native traditions and beliefs were taken out of these children. Students were away from parents, isolated, stripped of cultural identity, and were even forbidden to speak their native language. In almost all cases, these schools were housed inside of churches, 3/5 of which were Roman Catholic churches, where incredible amounts of rape, beatings, and other forms of abuse took place. Death tolls were so high among these children that nearly 6% of those who entered schools passed away. Elders of Brandon, Manitoba tell of a shocking story that took place at the top of a nearby hill. At the top of this hill was a church, which, like many, was a home to a residential school. Screams of terror and agony from young children are said to have been heard by many throughout the city on a daily basis. Despite this, these stories and facts were pushed under the rug and were found only at the back of Canadian history textbooks for decades. In total, an estimated 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children attended these residential schools. As shocking as it is, the last residential school was only closed as recently as 1996.
Right before dawn, as many as 10,000 whites descended upon Black Tulsa.
Opening fire?
Opening fire. There was a block-by-block battle throughout the black community. They would force the occupants of a house out. If people resisted, they were murdered on the spot. The homes were looted, and then they were set fire to.
Did the white authorities do anything to try to prevent this or control it?
They don't. They spend most of their time arresting blacks and disarming blacks, preventing them from defending their homes and businesses, taking them to these internment centers around town.
Sounds like a precursor of ethnic cleansing.
Absolutely.
Kenny Booker's father hid his wife and 5 children in the attic just before armed whites came to the front door.
We could hear him from the attic talking to him. Said, "Nigga, do you have a gun?" I think he said no. And he said, "Don't set my house on fire, please." He didn't tell him why. But after he left, not long after he left, they set it on fire, and we had to scramble down in a hurry. And his sister, that's 6 years old, she said, "Is the world on fire, Kenny?" I said, "I don't know, but we in trouble, deep trouble."
The trouble came from the air, too. Investigators say some of the fires you see in this rare footage of the riot were caused by whites dropping explosives from World War I vintage planes flying over Greenwood. The flames destroyed almost every home and business in Greenwood, 35 square blocks in all.
We didn't have no home. Everything was burned. All over there where we live, just burned down to the ground.
Late in the day, martial law was declared and National Guard troops patrolled the streets. The dead were everywhere, the bodies lying where they fell. Photographers turned some of their grisly pictures into souvenir postcards. Most of the dead were buried quickly in unmarked graves around town, but some apparently were laid to rest here in Tulsa's Oaklawn Cemetery in this anonymous section reserved for paupers. There were no funerals. The authorities outlawed funerals. There were no coffins, no headstones, no records of the burials. But a 10-year-old boy saw it all. Clyde Eddy walked by the cemetery with a friend, saw some men digging and some big wooden crates.
And we went in, naturally, and walked up to the first one and raised the lid up. There were 3 bodies of black men in it, just thrown in there. And we went over to another crate, a larger crate, and raised the lid on it, and there was 4 bodies in this one. And there was, let's see, there's either 4 or 5 more boxes scattered around. And about that time, one of the men saw us, and he run us out.
The newspapers didn't think the mass graves deserved many headlines, and the White City Fathers, proud of their booming oil town, wanted to bury the story along with the bodies. The official version, typos and all, came in a National Guard report. It said there were 35 dead, 9 whites and 26 blacks. But that number just keeps on rising.
We think now that something like 300 people were killed in this.
How many people were left homeless by the riot?
Oh my gosh, 10,000 people were left homeless by the riot.
How many of those were white?
None.